telling us her life.
Oh my, that sounds so ominous. Well, I was born in September of 1946, and when I was born, my birthday was not one that would be a problem. It's 9/11/1946. So when 9/11 did occur, I was having a birthday celebration on the way to school, where I was a principal at the time. And by the time I got to school, the celebration was over. We had to lock down the school, and it became a non-celebratory day. But on 9/11, I was born in 1946. My dad was in the Air Force, and we moved around quite a bit at the beginning of my life. And eventually he got out of the service, and we were living in St. Louis, Missouri. He was the aeronautical engineer at McDonnell Douglas. So I was raised there most of my elementary life and career there, and then high school, and then went to college not too far away from St. Louis as well. And so at the end of my college career, I sat in my last class next to an Air Force recruiter. And the Air Force recruiter kept telling me that I needed to go in the Air Force. Well, I thought, no, I don't need to be going in the Air Force, but it sounded kind of cool because he said, well, you know, after you finish, you know, your undergraduate degree, then when you're in the Air Force, you can get your master's, and if you ever even thought twice about it, you could get your doctorate because the military would pay for it. Well, at that time, the GI Bill was a lot different than it is now. But sure enough, that's what I did. I joined the service, and I was in the Air Force for 5.5 years. I married and had my first child, and at that time, you couldn't stay in the Air Force and have children. You couldn't, you know, be pregnant and then stay in the Air Force afterwards. They asked you to leave. So I left, and I stayed home with my kids. My first son was born in Washington, D.C., and that's where we were stationed at the time with my husband. And then after that, we moved along, and I started to thinking, you know, I really want to go back to school. So when we moved to Washington State, I went to a Presbyterian school there, not far from my house. I could walk to campus, which was wonderful. And I got my master's degree. And then we moved around some more, and we went to Europe. And when we were in Europe, I got kind of itchy about education again, and I started my doctorate through the University of Southern California. We had some courses that were over there. So that's what I was working on when all of a sudden it was apparent that it was time to leave. And I thought, oh my goodness, we've got to go back. And we went back to Luke Air Force Base, and my children then spent time with their grandparents while I went back to campus for a semester, and worked on my research. Well, that was a wonderful time and a fantastic time, but without my children, without my husband. So eventually we got back together. I finished up my degree and did my research in an elementary school, and then I began to get involved in the elementary school. And then I started teaching there. And then we moved to Colorado Springs, and I walked in the door and got a job as a music teacher here in Colorado Springs, and taught music for 15 years at Cheyenne Mountain School Elementary and the Cheyenne Mountain School District, sorry, not the elementary school. I was at 3 or 4 different schools. We kept moving me around. And then eventually I decided, you know, I really kind of like to be in the administrative side of the house. So I think, and then I ended up being a principal for 15 years at UPass Elementary. In between my being a teacher and being the principal at UPass up in Cascade, Colorado, I went to Leadville, Colorado for 2 years as an assistant principal. And it was there that I discovered that what it means to be the minority, because many people in the Leadville area are Hispanic. And it was there that I learned how to work a little bit better with young people that were different than my background. And that was all very good and a wonderful experience for me. So I would say in my lifetime, and now I'm retired and spend a lot of time reading and playing bridge and skiing and doing things at church, things that I have chosen to do. I would say though that the big life lesson that I've had my whole life is choices. You know, I took choices. I didn't make myself just think one way. When something, you know, came about, like the recruiter blowing in my ear, I thought I was going to be a music teacher. I had a job at a high school, but then that wasn't what I ended up doing. The choices came to me, and I took a choice. I took a detour from what I thought I was actually going to be doing. I finished the military, took a detour, and had children, which was one of my best blessings in my life for sure. And you know, then took another detour and ended up being a teacher, and then another detour, and ended up being a principal, and the whole time continuing my education, which is very dear to me. So I think, you know, if I had anything to say about your life and what you do with it, is to take advantage of the choices that are presented to you. They're not presented to you just willy-nilly. God has a lot to do with that. And so that's what I would suggest that you do with your life, is that you take advantage of God's gifts to you and take advantage of His abundant love for you.
You didn't touch much on your childhood.
I did have one, yeah, that's true.
How did that go?
It was awesome, actually. I didn't know how far back he really wanted me to go. After I was born in Denver, and there was a chickenpox epidemic in Denver, so we left Denver and traveled all the way down to Biloxi, Mississippi, where my dad was stationed, and they heated my bottles on the radiator on the way down, because at that time, of course, there was no formula. There was, you know, it was a very different time. And then when my dad was in the Korean War, we got stationed in in Okinawa, and so I went to kindergarten in Okinawa, then first grade back in Illinois, and then finally on to second grade and on in St. Louis area. So I did have an interesting childhood. It was just, you know, as little people, you don't remember everything that happens. I do remember going to Okinawa and being in a hurricane, and in the middle of the sky was green. It was kind of a lime green color, and we were in a Quonset hut, lived in a Quonset hut, you know, those big tin Quonset huts like this, and there were holes in the floor, and so the air would come up through the holes in the floor and raise the rug, you know, so the rugs would be up, and my sister and I thought that if we jumped on that, it would be like a magic carpet ride. Of course it wasn't, but it kept us from being frightened, which was kind of neat. And then in the eye of the storm, we went out and were on the, you know, the swings and the slides in our yard, and then back in the house again and jumping up and down on the carpet. So I do remember things. I don't remember going to school. I don't remember teachers' names. I don't remember those kinds of things, but I remember experiences, colors. I remember smells. Okinawa was not a pleasantly smelling place, you know, so I do remember things like that, but very interesting, but not one of the things, you know, when you get older, you don't talk about probably your young time in life, where it's much more vivid to you because you're not as old as I.
So you lived outside of the country?
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak any other languages other than English?
No. No, I took French in high school, and of course when we lived in Germany, I did speak a little bit of German there, but not fluently, just enough to go and order something to eat and, you know, to be nice to people, to try, and they'd laugh at us, but that was okay, you know, but no, I don't speak any other language fluently. And
you were in the Air Force?
Mm-hmm.
Was that before or after the Vietnam War?
That was during, as a matter of fact, yeah.
So you served in the Vietnam War?
I served during that time, but I did not go to Vietnam, no. We volunteered to go to Vietnam, and we ended up in the Philippines. So I lived in Clark Air Base in the Philippines for a couple of years. But we didn't actually go to war. But we were not looked upon with great reverence when we came back in uniform. In fact, my husband was spit upon, and that was a different time. And you know, it was all different then than it is now. A lot different. So I don't harbor any ill feelings about that. I had chosen my path, they had chosen their path, you know. But no, and none of us got hurt, so there you go. We were lucky.
Right. You spoke about choices earlier. Are there any choices you actually regretted?
No, not really, because whatever your choice is, then you make it your attitude about that choice is what makes it. If you say, I know, for example, let's say, for example, when my husband had the option to stay in the service or to go in the park service, and we were thinking about going in the park service, you know, and living like at Yellowstone or the Tetons, and him being a ranger and us living there, and we talked about that, and that was a choice. We chose not to do that. Years down the road, we kept saying, you know, I wonder what it would have been like, and wouldn't have that been fun? But then when our kids came along, we knew that we'd made the right choice, because they were in a different place where they could have a better education than perhaps they would have had in the middle of a park somewhere, you know. So you take whatever choices you make, and then you have to stick with it, or you make a new choice, you know. Had the service been really awful for me, I would have gotten out after 4 years, because I chose 4 years, but I was in 5.5 before I got pregnant, and then they asked me to leave. So, you know, I loved doing what I was doing, but everything I've done I've loved because it was the attitude with which you take it. You know, that's the thing. If you're going to do it and have fun in it. And if it's not fun, then make a new choice and shift. You know.
So you have children now. How many do you have?
2. I have a son and a daughter. My son and his wife and 2 grand boys live in Kansas City, and then my daughter and son-in-law and a grand girl and a grand boy live in near Detroit, Michigan.
And they live pretty good lives?
Yeah, they seem to. I think so. We just all got back from skiing in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, last week. We were there and had a lot of fun, all of us together, so.
Let's see. Of all the jobs you've worked at, which was your favorite?
Well, favorite for different reasons, but a job of my heart was being an elementary school teacher and a music teacher. I love that, being around little kids all the time. And I love music too, but music was not as much fun as the kids, and teaching them music and having that hopefully be a lifelong thing that they love and that they do and that they enjoy, you know, and that they feel good about. So I love that part, being with kids every single day. And I do miss that. I miss that. That's why you'll see me around here hugging little people. Gotta find them. Or you, hugging you too, and you. And, you know, just because I miss that. I really do miss that reciprocal love that comes back and forth from hugging a child.
So you were a grandma before you were a grandma?
Yeah, I was. I've always been a grandma, you're right.